Well, friends, welcome to another Carolyn Lee Pllc webcast, Investment Immigration Conversations. I'm your host, Carolyn Lee, principal and founder of Carolyn Lee Pllc, a U.S. investment immigration law firm dedicated to helping clients build their futures in the U.S. and abroad through investment immigration. Well, we're kicking off a series with today's webcast, and the series is going to feature regional centers under the EB-5 Reform and Integrity Act, which of course was so much about changing the way regional centers operate their business. And so I thought it would be really interesting for folks to hear about regional centers' experiences and their reactions to the RIA, the Reform and Integrity Act, how their business has changed, if any, what the outlook is, what the challenges are, what the opportunities are, all as operating regional centers under the RIA. And I'm kicking off this series with my good friends and clients, Birch Capital, with Bruce Ricciuti and Ben Cummings. And I want folks to know these guys and to hear their experience living with the RIA in these early months and as regional center operators pre-RIA. I also thought it would be interesting to talk to Birch, Ben, and Bruce because they have a pre-RIA exemplar-approved project. And of course, that has a very special treatment under the RIA, affirmed in the settlement agreement. The pre-exemplar approval is binding post-RIA on investor adjudications. So that's pretty interesting and exciting. So I thought it would be fun to hear about what that's like running with a pre-RIA exemplar approved project in the post-RIA space. Before we kick off our call, I must say this is not about any offer. There's no offer to sell any security. There's no offer made by this webcast or presentation, and this webcast does not constitute either advice or recommendation regarding any securities. So with that, please allow me to introduce Birch Capital, Bruce Ricciuti, Ben Cummings. Take it away, one of you. Please tell us about yourselves as regional center and as individuals. We want to know.
Sure. Well, Carolyn, thank you very much for having us. I'm Bruce Ricciuti, managing member of Birch Capital. Birch Capital is a private investment partnership. We raise money through friends and family, typically to invest in single tenant properties, multifamily properties, as well as alternative investments. Ben and I have been friends for 30 plus years. We started in the EB-5 space about 12 years ago, I believe, when we did our first project in Miami, which was very successful with the University of Miami Life Science and Technology Park. Then we moved on to Boston and did another large-scale multifamily mixed-use project. And now we're working on our third project, Trade Point Atlantic. We typically work on one project at a time, not to compete with our development sponsors. My background has been in commercial real estate for 30 plus years, and on the underwriting, valuation, acquisition, and disposition sides of the business. I have EB-5 was just a natural progression to sort of what we did every single day. We got introduced by a couple of immigration attorneys a number of years ago in Miami, where we're based in South Florida now. And we really just enjoyed the business because it was a little different to commercial real estate, that I always view it as sort of a win-win-win business. Everybody's on the same side, a little different than a traditional commercial real estate transaction, which I always found nice. We are fiduciaries to our investors, so we want them to succeed. We want our lending, our lenders. We're the lender. We want our development sponsors to succeed by raising this money. We want our investors to get their immigration status. We want them to be repaid. So it's really it's a great experience, and I've been thrilled to be involved with it for this number of years. Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, Carolyn and Bruce. I'm Ben Cummings. I was one of the founders, along with Bruce, of Birch Capital, and now I'm senior advisor to Birch Capital. My background is somewhat different from Bruce's, but pretty much a lifetime of commercial real estate investing, development, and running some large real estate departments for two national retailers here in the United States. As Bruce said, we've known each other for many years. We've worked together on a lot of projects over those years. And so although we have different backgrounds, I'm a real estate attorney by background, and Bruce is sort of the appraiser, valuation, due diligence, and finance guy. But the two skills that we have match up quite easily, and as he mentioned, we've enjoyed working. We've mostly enjoyed working in the EB-5 segment. It is different. It has given us the opportunity to meet a lot of people from many countries and to help them and their families get immigration status here in the United States, while doing something that we know about in selecting projects for them to invest in that are secure, that are going to be as much as we can guarantee, which we really cannot make a guarantee, but we want to see them get their funds back when their immigration status is achieved. And we look at these projects as something that we would not try to encourage investors to go into unless we were comfortable with them ourselves as individuals. So that's sort of our background. It's been about 12 years in EB-5, and it's been an exciting and interesting experience.
Indeed, exciting and interesting. That kind of encapsulates EB-5. And I'll help you toot your own horn. I'll say that you are among the regional centers that have had a history of principal repayment to your investors as well, backing up your commitment and track record. Well, thank you for that. And so, okay, so we've had a huge sea change with the EB-5 Reform and Integrity Act. It's 100 pages of legislation, which is really a feat, I think, in any sector, and certainly in immigration. So how has this changed your lives, or, or more specifically, keeping to our theme, your lives as regional center operators? And first of all, tell us about your regional center, what geographic scope and what your focus has been and so forth. Tell us about that, and then how your lives have changed under the RIA.
Okay, well, I'll come back. The regional center that we're working on now is in Baltimore County, Maryland. We've had it for probably 8 years now. It actually started out with a project that we thought was going to get built and did not, and then moved on to a much larger, much more interesting investment opportunity for EB-5, which was a redevelopment of a 3,300 acre parcel that used to be a Bethlehem steel manufacturing plant just outside of Baltimore. It has now, since 2016, developed into a global logistics center with almost 13 million square feet of new industrial, manufacturing, and office space, led by an investment group that has very deep financial pockets and is very experienced in the industrial and distribution scenes. It's probably the largest single EB-5 development, certainly on the East Coast, if not in the whole country. And it's been a very exciting project to work on. Obviously, our largest project. And, you know, to get to the second part of your question, I guess, not much has changed in how we have operated as a regional center, pre-RIA and post-RIA. We're still doing the same things we did from the beginning and from our previous projects in terms of our EB-5 sponsorship, our relationship with the developer, and our relationship with our investors. And, you know, Bruce, maybe you want to talk a little more about the detail of what happens behind the scenes at Birch Capital.
Sure. Well, Birch is a relationship-based company. We're a boutique firm. We don't have a lot of people behind the scenes that work with Ben and myself. So we need to have great relationships with our sponsors, and that's been why we go one project at a time. And we've had existing relationships with all three of our developments in our two other regional centers, which really makes our job so much easier that we can get on the phone with the CFO of one of our projects and talk about an issue that might deal with investors' redemption, might deal with investors' immigration status, and we can get an answer usually favorable to our investors within 15 minutes. So Ben and I were just in Baltimore last week for a site visit, as well as meetings with the CFO and representatives of our current project, Tradespoint Atlantic. So we have those type of relationships that also go into how we deal with our investors, which is also very important to us. Some of our investors have become our friends. We keep in touch with them, hear about their families after they immigrate to the United States. This is a small world. We were on a call last week with one of our investors from Miami, who sometimes helps us out with some matters across the world, for that matter. But we are very transparent, and it's been our model from day one. We have an interactive website and file maintenance where investors can see access to all of their accounts 24/7, 365. They can see their immigration status, their immigration lawyers, their advisors all have individual portal access. They can see their investment settlement statements. They have access to us almost on a 24/7 basis if they need to as well. So that's very important to us. We hold webinars for investors so that they can hear more about the project. We keep them up to date through constant contact, through other forms of the project. So they probably hear too much from us sometimes, but I think that our investors hopefully enjoy hearing from us.
I feel like I can chime in and attest to that. I've known you guys for a while. I think maybe around 10 years at this point. And hearing you say that that Birch is relationships driven, I don't think I've heard that before. And it is very much true. And one example is during our legislative advocacy, right? You know, it was tense at moments and we needed all hands on deck. I was calling my clients. We needed to educate members of Congress about EB-5 and what this legislation and why we needed an extension, the program to come back to life. And I think you called them up, and they were my experience with that specific ask and encounter at that moment of need was they were right there. And they were very organized. They got together with their advisors, with the principals, with us on a Zoom call, got informed, asked the right questions. Their advisors asked good questions, and they acted and were effective. And I don't think all that would have come together like that without the relationship. So good job.
And they feel the same way about our investors, which is really, really important. So that's sort of where, like, at the beginning of my talk, I mentioned about the win-win-win, that we know that we can go to the trade point folks and say, you know, whatever the issue might come up with any type of immigration status for an investor, that, you know, once you advise us, Carolyn, what the right answer is, we can go to trade point and execute quickly. And I think that's always in the best favor of everybody involved.
I'll just say one fun thing about what Ben said about the vastness, because I grew up mostly in Brooklyn, Seoul before that. So I don't think I could have pictured what 3,000 acres is before having gone there and driven around. So yeah, it's a treat for anybody who grew up in the urban core like me.
It's about 1/3 the size of Manhattan, so that does give you some perspective anyway, as a native New Yorker.
Yeah, exactly. And I was very lost without the grid, so it was nice to be driven around as I like to be, generally speaking. So, all right, so the whole RIA, it came down, and then we had these forms, and it was very confusing. I must say, I think it was more confusing, right, for players who were continuing to operate before the RIA and after our RIA. What are we supposed to do? You know, we learn from the service that the regional centers are not authorized anymore, are not designated. They've got to refile, and then there's litigation, and then you had this pre-RIA exemplar, which we thought was a great thing, and you know, there's confusion about that. So there was, that's been clarified. So how did you react to all of that? What was your approach? Did you make filings? What did you do in those early days of confusion?
That's a good question. And looking back on it, confusion is the right word. And really for the past couple years before RIA, there was a lot of confusion in the EB-5 market for a lot of reasons, mostly political. Once the RIA was passed, you know, we think in general it was a long time coming, and it was a very good result because it did what it was supposed to do in extending the program for a 5-year period, which gave everybody a chance to take a deep breath and say, okay, now we know that this business that Congress created 30 years ago is still going to continue. And that's good for the developers. It's good for EB-5 sponsors like us. And it was great for investors from foreign countries who really didn't know what was going to happen to their immigration status. So we did the required filings as best we could with the limited amount of guidance from USCIS. Still no regulations, and as far as we know, that make everything perfectly clear. But we filed right away for our I-956, which was to reauthorize the regional center. Probably 30 days after we did that, it turned out we didn't have to do that, but that was a court decision. And then we filed the 956F, I think is the right letter, which was to approve the existing project, which had been approved back in 2017 as a continuing existing project. So with Carolyn's help, we did that quickly. We paid the fees that we were supposed to pay, and we received our receipt of the I-956F pretty shortly thereafter. So we didn't start arguing about it. We just did what it said, what we thought it said to do, and we're pretty confident and hopeful that we did it all right.
Yes. I don't want to overstate things. And just to avoid any confusion on the part of our audience's sake, the 9.5, so the result of the litigation was the 9.56 for existing regional centers was not required to continue to operate. However, you do need to file the 9.56 by December 29th to continue to operate there on an ongoing basis. So just a point of clarification, the service had taken the position that existing regional centers had to file a new 9.56 to continue to operate. Result of the litigation was that regional centers did not. If they were designated pre-RIA, they continue to have their designation. However, they must still file a 9.56 by December 29th. And so for regional centers like Birch that already filed their 9.56s before, you're good, and you may be asked to amend, or if there are any amendments to your pending 9.56. Okay. Great. What are, speaking, so what were some, you mentioned that there were some confusing things and some challenging things as regional center operators before the RIA as well. Could it be that you're also talking about redeployment?
Well, we did do a redeployment. Carolyn, thank you for asking. About 3 years ago, before we had any real regulations on redeployment.
Yeah, and just to be clear, before you, from the perspective of the regional center, just talk to us about yes, your redeployment experience and the challenges. What was it like to have to redeploy in the pre-RIA environment? How did you manage that? And your thoughts post-RIA on redeployment?
Well, we redeployed about 3 years ago from a very successful project in Boston where the developer was in a position to prepay the loan early. So with a 5-year loan agreement, they wanted to prepay the loan in 3.5 years because the project was so successful. And we actually had investors who wanted to be redeemed, and we had investors who wanted to redeploy and stay in the project. So we all knew that we had this sort of what I thought was a very scary issue with this geographic responsibility, or for a better word, just to redeploy within the same geography as you're just in regional center. We scoured the market and could not find anything in what we thought was a timely manner, which I think your counsel would indicate was maybe a year, that we can get comfortable getting a project that we can take to investors with our risk level, underwriting requirements, get it underwritten, sign up a deal within a year. We did have our existing projects in Trade Point, a few other things, other projects in mind. But we basically did the best we could with the rules that we had at the time. We had numerous seminars with our investors. I think we had 3 or 4, had a couple hundred people on each call for them to ask questions, understand the risks involved with what we knew at the time. We did do the redeployment out of geography. And we also basically put together a consortium of other regional centers to lobby Congress, CIS, very actively to give us some guidance on this issue. So we were very active. We basically took the position that we were redeploying from one exemplar approved project to another exemplar approved project. We were staying in the EB-5 ecosystem, and we were sort of just crossing our fingers that the geography issue would become and luckily it did. I think our investors are very happy. They're in Trade Point Atlantic right now in a very secure project that sought their underwriting and investor criteria. Because our mantra on all of our investments is return of capital, jobs and return of capital. And even if CIS was to say you redeployed out of geography, we are in a position to say, okay, but we still have, we're exemplar approved project. If you want to count each investor to have another 10 jobs, we have those jobs for them. And it's still in the EB-5 world. So we felt very confident that we did the right thing with what we knew. We were very happy to learn with the RIA that we don't have the geography issue.
Well, I remember some of those discussions, and when you say it was scary to have to redeploy within the original geography, you know, and finding that that there was a conflict between having to perhaps, you know, be limited to the original geography and the fact that there was nothing suitable that you felt was quality enough for your investors who needed to redeploy. So
you really, you're sort of stuck between a time commitment where you have to have something quickly. And then you sort of think that if you're going out in the marketplace where the investment community, the developer, the what have you, knows that you have a geography requirement, you're going to be limiting your leverage and your ability to work the best deal for your investors, or have to take on additional risk. So that's one reason why we thought it was very unfair to have the geography requirement, especially after the jobs were created and the investors, did everything that they were supposed to do.
Yeah.
And we met the at-risk requirement. So we knew that we were going to do that. So it was a little nerve-wracking, but we were confident in our position.
And I think that there are issues with the way that wrinkle in the guidance was rolled out. There was certainly no notice there. So for all of these reasons, the result under the RIA makes good sense. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that, Ben?
Well, I just wanted to add on in that the redeployment adventure, besides the risk issue that Bruce has mentioned, the one thing that I think we did quite right was that we also put everything to a vote of the existing investors and allowed them to make their own choice whether they did want to be redeployed outside of the geography, or if they in fact wanted to withdraw from the immigration process altogether and get their money back. And so, I think that's the right way to do a redeployment. In today's world, post-RIA, certainly we wouldn't have had as much anxiety about it, but neither would have the investor. So we truly were looking out for their interest to let them make the choice.
That's very interesting.
What to do.
I mean, I have heard good corporate securities advisors on that point, from the perspective of representing the regional center, the issuer, the general partner, that the seeking of the investor votes, while of course this is that the investors would want that, they would want to participate in that important decision making, that it is not, that there are feasibility issues and just from a business, corporate management standpoint, and the investors being so far flung, that it is that the regional centers slash managers may want to limit that, that being written into the operating agreement or the partnership agreement. So I guess kudos to you for not taking the easier and reasonable approach to that.
Yeah, we really,
Oh,
go ahead. I was just gonna say, we really, we take our fiduciary responsibilities, very seriously. This is the investor money. It's not the general partner's money. So they should have as much input or vote to where their money goes. It's not our position to serve our interests, to invest in a project that suits the general partner. We're here to meet the needs of our limited partners. And we feel that if we do what's right for them, they're going to do what's right for us. And it's going to be, like I said, a win-win-win. And if we continue to do what's right for the investors, we hope that they stick with us and we continue to invest their money until they get their immigration status.
I mean, it's that simple. And I think that that is the spirit of the RIA, is to better align the program with investors' interests and with the government's interests. USCIS has long wanted more teeth into their oversight authority, and they have that now. That said, if you were to have coffee with the investor program office, or perhaps a swanky lunch in DC, what would you say? What would you say? What would you say about, you guys, you're doing okay on this. Keep that up. You need to kind of tweak this. You need to work on that. What would you say?
I think the one broad challenge that CIS has is execution. I mean, now we all know what the rules are for the next 5 years, the big picture rules, the 30,000-foot rules. The question is, can CIS execute better than they've been able to do in the past primarily again for the investors? They've not had the resources that they've needed, and I think they have not fully understood in the past the complexities of the commercial real estate world, where you have developers taking risks, you have lenders taking risks, you have EB-5 sponsors like us taking risks, and you have investors taking very, very big risks. And if you looked at somebody coming to you and saying, I want you to give me $800,000 and we'll tell you in 2 years or maybe 8 years what you get for it, it's sort of like buying a car. I mean, would you buy a car for $50,000 if General Motors said, well, we'll tell you in 2 years if we're even going to be making the car, and if we're going to sell it to you, it might be 8 years from now. Execution in this business, I mean, this is a business that Congress set up, and they asked Immigration Service to execute it, and they need the resources. I mean, I'm sure they're competent, smart people there, but they got a lot of catching up to do and new RIA rules to deal with. And they've got to just move it. They got to get it moving faster.
Okay, I was just going to ask.
Successful. That's all.
To make it concrete, when you say execute, what would you say? What are you looking for? So speed.
I think that
a little faster.
Speed and
Processing time.
Processing
time.
At this point, processing investor petitions is probably even as or more important than processing regional center.
Make it concrete.
petitions.
Why is that important? Why is processing times important? And for whom?
Well, if you're in a business, you have customers, and the customers of all of us that are in the EB-5 world are the investors. And time is important to them. They're the ones putting up the money, and they're getting a great benefit from it in being able to get their US visa, but it's got to be in some reasonable time frame for everybody. The whole development system won't work if timing is uncertain. You can't go out and get a loan and say, I might need it in 6 months or I might need it in 3 years. If you're going to build a project, you can't do that with your contractors. You can't ask your investors to put their money up and wait an indefinite period of time. And it's just a process matter.
Every business, regardless, runs on some sort of time requirement. Time to, as Ben says, execute. Time. How long is an investor going to be in this program? How long does it take to raise the money in order for a sponsor to fund the EB-5 entity? So if you don't have a time commitment, an idea, I don't think you're really ever going to have an ability to meet your responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
I always say when the developer asks us to come in, or a business wants EB-5 money, one of the first things we always tell them is that this is a best efforts raise, and we have no idea when we would have the money to fund. These are variables outside of our control. It's almost like the whole EB-5 world through CIS is in some sort of process outside your control or outside your knowledge.
Right.
So I always say processing times, and then for the investor, I mean, that's one of the big issues, is then if they find out it's going to take them 6, 7, 8 years, it's just going to take other investors will not want to won't be interested in the program. So it's going to get slow. Projects are going to die. Great projects aren't going to be able to get funded. And then I think one of the other big issues that I've always had is transparency. The government wants us to be very transparent. They want us to file a lot of forms, to provide a lot of information. It'd be nice if there was a little central source for EB-5 sponsors, for taxpayers that want to know about this program, and for investors that they can go to a website and see regional center sponsors who are acting in good faith in the program, or good citizens, what their projects are, what their immigration status is for their investors, et cetera. So I would say processing times and transparency.
Yep. And so riffing off of what I just heard from both of you, I do processing times. I mean, the reported processing times are ridiculous, many years on all the product lines for EB-5. It occurs to me, though, that there's so much uncertainty. It is investment intrinsically has its uncertainties, and certainly our investment program has to have at-risk investments. So that's all baked in. So in all of that uncertainty, having some sense of, well, here are the outer limits of processing times on your case. I think that would be enormously helpful. Setting aside the issues related to our backlogs, which are the visa backlogs and the quota, which is a separate thing, separate huge advocacy issue. Just being able to tell investors, our customers, as you say, our clients, and the customers of USCIS, look, your petition can have a range, and this is the outside time frame. It will be decided by this time frame. Some reasonable. It could be, we're all used to this process being years. I think some reasonable range would be enormously helpful. On the transparency front, I will commend USCIS for having lots and lots of factual information about RIA implementation on their website. But I think what you're saying, so kudos on that. But I think what you're saying, Bruce, if I understand, is wanting maybe more information about regional centers. Is that right? And
I think so. You know, we
Okay.
follow the 924
Yeah.
annually, the 924 annually. I'm not sure what would be considered proprietary or confidential, but if this whole RIA is about integrity, it'd probably be nice to see some of those. So regional centers are following these integrity measures, maybe to what level, in compliance, et cetera, so that taxpayers, investors, the general public can sort of see what's going on in this program, so it's not as mysterious, especially after a lot of bad press. It'd be sort of nice to see some good press, nationally about EB-5, that some good things are being done rather than say bad actors or, investors being, harmed.
I love that, actually. I really like the idea. I don't have, I can't think of specifics yet, but I really like the idea. Here's, this is a new EB-5 world that's opened up now under the RIA. How can we get more light in here? How can we provide real world examples of the RIA working and how it's working and doing good things? I hope we do see more of that, and that everybody in this ecosystem, in this space, will look for those opportunities, because I think that can be really wonderful.
Benefits everyone.
It benefits everyone. And it is the face of EB-5 that has been missing from the press, despite all the good that it did, even pre-RIA, lots and lots and lots of good.
Yeah.
Well, we've been just talking away for the last 3/4 of an hour, and we do have a couple of questions. So why don't we take them?
Okay.
All right.
Okay. All right. Here to Bruce's suggestion. So Bruce, you got some support for what you'd love to see, what you'd love to tell IPO in your swanky DC lunch. Great to see you, and thanks for sharing your experience in this call. I'd be interested to hear more of your observations re-RIA impacts in any of the following areas: regional center cost of doing business, cost of EB-5 capital, types of EB-5 projects you will seek and consider going forward, investor market potential, investor sentiment, the level and type of competition you face for investors. I must say, this is a question from our dear friend, Suzanne Lizicki, and the specificity of these questions and their perspicacity really speak to the questioner. So Bruce and Ben, take one or a combination or all.
That's a lot of questions from Suzanne. It's probably a 2-hour conference call with her.
We'll have another webcast, and we'll bring Suzanne on.
And all of us. Just on the first few, in today, the other issue to try and answer all of these questions has to do, in my mind, with a large extent, with the current economy. I mean, EB-5 money now can be very helpful for development. So it has not been that way in the past couple years when interest rates were so low. Now they've skyrocketed in the last 30 to 60 days. And so I think the program has a great potential, if it moves quickly, to encourage investors to invest here. It would help the development community. I think the cost of doing business, it's a little more time consuming post RIA, because you got to fill out more paperwork. It's marginally more expensive because you got to pay more fees. But if you can make that up in new interest among investors and have more volume, again, this is a business whose basic principle is bring low-cost capital to the United States to create jobs. And I think sometimes everybody forgets that. And that requires execution. I mean, it goes back to my other comments. You know, you can't, we can't move everything quickly and then have everything stop for 2 or 3 years. And we're competitive with other countries in the similar business. So I forget what the rest of Suzanne's questions are, but we'll be happy to chat offline about them, I'm sure.
Well, to your point, Ben, to me, this feels a little bit like how things felt in 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
When EB-5 just took off domestically among developers looking for capital because there was no traditional debt. So yeah, again, this is a real opportunity to optimize on a national resource. Bruce, did you have anything?
No, I was just going to answer maybe a few more of Suzanne's questions. The types of projects that, Birch Capital is always going to look at are what we call, credit EB-5 projects. There's going to have to be some sort of credit component. Our cost of capital for our users is usually considerably lower than other costs of capital that they have just because of their creditworthiness. In Miami, we had the University of Miami backing our project. Obviously a very strong private university. Our Boston project actually had equity capital that was extremely strong, that gave us a lot of comfort level. And now with TradePoint, we have a huge credit play in the fact that we have, it's over $1 billion in development now. And I keep wanting to do this, but I haven't done it. To what level of our revenues are controlled by either Fortune 500 companies or what we would call investment grade credit tenants. Amazon, Home Depot, Federal Express, those are probably the three, BMW, Volkswagen. So we were just talking this last week with the TradePoint folks about what's the market capitalization of the TradePoint Atlantic portfolio, if you will. And you can always say, I don't know what Amazon's is these days, but I think it's over $1 trillion. But I got to think that the market capital at TradePoint Atlantic right now is probably over $2 trillion, which is a little crazy. But you have Amazon, BMW, Volkswagen, Federal Express, and Home Depot, which are probably the big boys. And when you have that level of creditworthiness, you're obviously your interest rates, your rates of return are going to be a lot lower, but your ability to repay investors is, we can't say it's guaranteed, but it's about as high as you can get. I don't think anybody's worried about Amazon, BMW, Home Depot, or some of our other tenants going out of business in the next 5 to 6 years. So those are the types of projects we seek. It's got to have a credit play. Invested market potential, investor sentiment. I think investors are taking a look at a lot of projects these days. And they're going to have to seek what meets their requirements. Some are going to be, some investors are going to want, are going to be concerned with return of capital at lower return rates, similar to us. Somebody might willing to take more risk, want a higher interest rate, higher rate of return. That's not going to be someone that's going to be interested in us. So I think every investor is going to have their own investment dynamics. And I think we don't really know the competition these days. We don't know what projects are really out there, who's going forward, who's scared by the RIA, who thinks that, it's not worth it to go forward. But I think it's an exciting time. We're excited to be back in business. I think our investors are tired of hearing from us now that we're doing something else.
Well, I think this is a good note to end on. This is an exciting time. We've all on this call worked really hard to bring this moment about. So I think we have a lot to look forward to. Well,
Mhm.
everybody, friends, thank you for joining us as always. And my special thanks to Bruce and Ben. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Carolyn. This was a real
Thank-
treat for us.
Yeah,
This
thank
is
you for
fun.
inviting us.
My pleasure. And I'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Bye all.
Bye.
Thank you.